Hi, everybody. Welcome to another week. We're starting another week together. I really have to try to figure out how in the world to fashion some kind of place to be able to study out here next to the pond with you guys. But I'm sitting on this little teeny stool and have my stuff laid out all over the place. So I don't know if they have an outside desk, but somehow I'm going to have to find something. So I'm so thankful that I get to bring you into this beautiful sanctuary where I can share my heart with you. But it's a little silly if you could see me from the outside. Today we're going to cover something extraordinary. And so, and it's very kind of deep and a little teeny bit hurtful. It's kind of like a reprimand, but it's a promised reprimand, if that makes sense. So we're going to get started because we're going to learn. I'm going to teach you today an extra way to study the Word and how to go a little bit deeper on your own as you study. All right, so let's pray. Father, thank you so much for this time. Lord, thank you for the beauty of everything that you have given us in your Word. Father, help us hear what your Son was teaching and help it become relevant to our hearts today. Amen. Okay. We are going to be doing a lot of talking about what Jesus is saying. We're going to be focusing on Jesus, and then we're going to peek a little bit underneath to see other portions of the scripture where we can see that Jesus is actually echoing God's statements in the Old Testament. Okay. Now we may not get to all of that because it's pretty exciting to go this next level of reading the Bible. So if you don't like it, you don't ever have to do it. But I didn't know how to write it in a way in your extra work. So I thought, well, we'll just do it together and see how it goes. All right. So it's going to be just a teeny bit different. But please do go to Facebook, look under Jot and Tittle, and you will find the extra work for today. Okay. All right. Well, our I am statement today. And remember what we're doing. We are trying to really grab a hold of who God says we are so that our identity will be firmly placed into him. And so that's what we're studying. And today, it's going to sound odd, but once you see what Jesus is doing, I think it's going to make sense to you. So the I am is, I am not a whitewashed tomb. Okay, I'm going to say that again. I am not a whitewashed tomb. Now we're going to find that is a very, very, very critical statement that Jesus uses with the audience he was speaking to at that time. And we don't live during Jesus's time, so some of the parables are like, huh? But what we have to do, and this is where our next step is, we have to transport ourselves into that time in history and see if we can learn something from the phrases that he uses. So we are going to find out how really, really, really crazy this concept of whitewashed tombs is. Okay? So we are going to start by reading our main verse. If we get to all the extended verses, that's great, but I'm pretty realistic that our time goes fast, so it may not happen. So those extra scriptures will be in your extra work for today. So we are going to read Matthew 23, verses 27 and 28. And I'm just going to set the scene for you. He is speaking, you're going to see in verse 1, he is speaking to this crazy amount of people. Okay, he's speaking to the multitudes, which also include his disciples and those that have already chosen to follow him. Okay, so this is not one of those really small audiences. So this one is for everyone. Okay, this is for everybody. And but the only ones that are probably going to understand how important this is are those that understand the illustration of whitewashed tombs. Okay, we're going to read it together and then we're going to try to unpack it. Okay, here we are, Matthew 23, and we're going to look. Oh, I am sorry. I will tell you that oftentimes when a chapter starts by him talking to multitudes and disciples, you will see later in the chapter that he will call aside his followers and maybe even call aside even further his 12 and then even further his 3. Okay, so you will see that he kind of, as he teaches up here, and then those that want more, he gives them more. Today, we are going to follow him all the way into that beautiful inner circle where we want to know more. Verses 27 and 28. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like whitewashed tombs, which on the outside appear beautiful, but inside they are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you too outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Now, this whole chapter 23 is a really tough chapter to read. Unless you are removed from this reprimand. But as a Christ follower, we all need these reprimands. Now, in the Bible, when you see the word woe, that needs to be a huge sign that you recognize. Woe in biblical time. I don't even know anything parallel of what I would say today, except I guess it would have to be an illustration rather than a definition. The word woe would be similar to coming up to let's say a mine, where workers go in the tunnel, and in front of that tunnel would be that giant sign, and the tape and the wood, and saying, "Do not enter. Warning, warning, warning. Danger, danger, danger." So when he says, "Whoa," I can give you an illustration. I just did it this morning. My grandson, Milo, he's going to be 2 in a couple days, and he is just full of energy. And I love sharing the pond with him. I'm teaching him how to feed the fish and, recognize all the things at the pond. And this morning, he wanted to do it himself. He didn't want to sit where Yaya was holding him so that he wasn't in a dangerous position to fall in the pond. And he was just not having it this morning. And I had to resort to saying, "Milo Nolan Frisch, Yaya said no." And his little eyes, he was like, "Yaya's yelling at me." He knew by the tone of my voice and by me saying, "Milo Nolan Frisch," that I meant business. So when Jesus would say, "Whoa," it was not, "Oh no," that was that intensive no. So we need to take this with a lot of weight. This isn't just a regular teaching of Jesus. He classified it as really deep just by using the word woe. All right. Now, what I want to teach you is something that's going to sound hard. And the first couple times you try it, it will be hard. But it doesn't stay hard. Okay? And it's worth all the effort. Sometimes when we read the Bible, we get kind of lost, or we lose the meaning, because we try to filter it through our own understanding of the world today. Many of you out there have probably visited or even live, I don't know who's on the other side of the screen, in Israel. You might very well may have, but I never have. So to understand what Jesus is saying, we need to travel in time. Now, the way that you can do that on your own is to start using what is technically called extra biblical references. And all of that means is that you start looking at science books, history books, archaeology books. Well, I say the word books. You know me, I like the pages. But you start looking at all the other sources that tell us a little bit about this day. this day and age. Now, one of my favorite ways to look things up is I have a couple books that just are ginormous tools for me that I use regularly. One of those is the Archaeology Bible. It is incredible. It's just a Bible, but what makes it incredible is the people who put it together, who published it, included in the pages history, tradition, common practices, definitions of all, I shouldn't say of all because it's not on every verse, but of many of the things that are listed in the Bible. So that by reading that, it takes you to footnotes and articles, and suddenly a picture opens up and you're like, oh, I get it. So it's not expensive when it comes to buying Bibles. Sometimes Bibles are expensive, but it is one of my absolute favorite tools. You can use that. Now, I am not going to recommend because it's very costly, but I'm 53 years old and I've been doing this for a while, so I didn't pay the cost all at once. So it's not costly for me to go to my books. I've collected them for 20 some years, almost 30 years, and I inherited some of my dad's. So I have a huge library. We've shared it together before. So I'm not saying to you, go out and buy a bunch of books. No, I am assuming that if you are doing devotions online, then you are probably a person who knows how to do things online. I am not. I'm an old school girl. And so you are going to probably be able to do it faster because you have the online world at your fingertips. You can type in the century, the location of anything you want to know. You can type in things that will show you absolute, detail of places and things and people. One of the things that I like to do is study the old Jewish culture, because my husband is Jewish and his father is Jewish, and how to recognize the beauty of being a Jewish man who recognized the Messiah. But we still live according to the Jewish law because that's how Jesus lived. Now, I'm not talking about, sacrifice and all that. I'm just talking about you can't stop being Jewish when you come to know the Messiah. And so my husband is Jewish. Yes, he is. And it is wonderful. It is wonderful. So one of my favorite things to do is I have several books. One of them is How Did People Live During Jesus' Time? So you can find those kind of things. Now, some of the books that I have would probably be 100 different resources you would have to look up. That's all condensed into one book. So what I want you to understand is the next step to studying God's Word is to okay, I'm reading what God says. I'm letting the Holy Spirit interpret it. Now, I wonder what somebody else says. Okay, I'm not talking commentaries, although you can go to commentaries, but we're talking about getting information, factual information about history and science and customs, traditions, and definitions. We've already talked about you can go to commentaries, which is just another person's opinion. But what we're doing today is not opinion. It's going back to school you're taking a class in Bible history. Okay? So we are going to transport ourselves for just a second. Caitlin and I have not done that video yet. Okay, we'll get on that. Another good resource that is super easy and doesn't take a lot of time is the Blue Letter Bible app, because it will give you just a few tidbits. It's not enough if you want to go full-blown history, but it's enough to get you started. Okay? So I'm going to tell you what you are going to find. But please do not let me be the substitute for you doing it yourself. I want you to do it yourself. In my research of studying Jesus' time and the Jewish tradition, because who is Jesus talking to in these verses? Let's look. He tells us, woe to who? Look and see. Who is he saying woe to? The scribes and the Pharisees. Those are two different entities or titles that you can look up and see exactly what their role was. You can look in any place you want to look. Look up those two roles because they're titles. They're titles to a person who has the responsibility to do something. But I'm going to give you the boiled down version. They were Jewish church leaders. Even deeper than that, they were seen as elite, as nobody else could be worthy of their position. So a scribe and a Pharisee started out having beautiful roles in the sense that they would record and they would help teach the law. But as years and ages kept going, the leaders of the church began to put their own twist to God's word. And so he is speaking to people that are extremely familiar with the Old Testament scrolls. They taught it. They were supposed to be the elite. I don't know how to describe it, but I guess it would be like Billy Graham. Everybody thinks about Billy Graham as being, like a forefront leader in teaching people about Jesus. Absolutely. So they had that kind of, wow, everybody knew them. They were so powerful. In fact, they became so powerful in Jesus' time that it was by their influence that Rome actually, who was in charge, was able to crucify Jesus. So we're talking about a huge presence in this time in the Bible. You will also find that at this time in the Bible, they were no longer walking or acting in the purity of that role. They were completely twisted up. And so by understanding who it's to, start looking that up right away. All right. Now, as you look, you probably have never used or maybe even heard the term whitewashed tomb. I've never used it. I've never heard it used in context except in the scripture. So that would be another thing that you would look up. You would start by saying, what is whitewashed tomb? Or you would look in a book about Jewish living and you would go under and it would probably be in the index. Okay? Sometimes in the history kind of books that you would look up, they will have actual books of the Bible, verse by verse and chapter by chapter, so that you can see it in consecutive order. However you choose to look it up, look it up. What you are going to find is that whitewash was actually a wonderful thing that they had come up with. Levitical law, Old Testament, way back at the beginning, when God first established who his people were. And I want you to understand, we're talking about his people. We're not talking about strangers to God. We're talking about the people who are in relationship with God. And it was really, really important. And one of the laws that was made is that you can't touch a dead body. You can't even touch where the body is buried. That's why Jesus is, that's why the resurrection is really funny, because none of those disciples would have ever touched that stone. So it's kind of funny. But anyways, so what would happen is people would stumble across a grave and have no idea that was a grave, and then become defiled because they had touched a gravesite or a tombstone. without having any idea. So this process of whitewashed tombs became their tradition of how to help keep themselves pure. It was something that they came up with so they wouldn't accidentally sin. Or because remember, the only way that they could be holy is through sacrifice. So anything that they did in and of themselves, they always had to make atonement for. They couldn't just go wash their feet and say, oops, I stepped on a gravesite. So the depth of this is really important. So as you do this research, you will see that the literal definition of whitewash is like a watered down plaster. Today it would be kind of like really wet chalk paint. And they would put it on the outside of a tomb, or they would put it on the outside where the stones were, where somebody was buried. And that prevented them from accidentally walking on a gravesite so that they wouldn't be unclean before God. So you see, this is a beautiful thing that they had started practicing way, way, way back then. Because it was one of those ways that they put something in their life to show God that they didn't want to sin. They weren't looking to sin. So they took unbelievable precautions in their life. So Jesus wasn't upset about whitewash. And you're going to see that in the history books. You know, it goes so far as that the reason that they call it whitewashed is because it would show up in the dark. So they wouldn't even stumble in the darkest of nights. Are you seeing how that just, wow, this is amazing. But he's using it as a reprimand to the scribes and Pharisees. Those two don't fit together because it was the Old Testament Jewish leaders who helped come up with the idea of whitewashed to keep the people from sinning. And now all of a sudden, Jesus is talking to leaders saying, you're just like whitewash. So how did it go from a good thing to a bad thing? Let's think about that for a minute, okay? What was the purpose of whitewash? It had a good purpose. But what was its literal purpose? Come on, I know you know. To show where sin was so that you could bypass it. Okay? What is Jesus saying that they are doing? Let's look at verse 28. Even so, you outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. Now all of a sudden the light bulb should be kind of firing off because now you know what actually whitewash means. And in this phrase, Jesus is saying, you can throw as much paint, decorations, because what was happening at this time is the Jewish leaders' hats were getting bigger, their robes were getting fancier, they would walk around with fringe hang. I mean, you could see them coming a mile away because they made sure everybody knew who they were. So literally, he was telling them, you have decorated yourself all up, but I gotta tell you, you are like that whitewashed tomb. You are decorating dead bones. Because you see, the reality of whitewashed tomb is that there was really, truly a body underneath that paint. And that body represented death and sin and contamination. And by putting a mark on it, it was supposed to keep you from sinning. And that was part of what the scribes and Pharisees' job was. Their job was to help keep people from sinning. And Jesus turns the table on them and says, no, you're no longer helping them not sin. You are representing the epitome of paint over dead bones. You have so much sin still in your life, but you wear these costumes. You wear these things that make you look like you're righteous. And Jesus equates a word with what they're doing. And the word is hypocrite. Now, I want you to go look that up. Okay? That comes from a Greek word. And I want you to understand how that word can be used here. Because it is a Greek word. And you're going to find in history that Rome was in charge and Greek was extremely important in this time. So the words Jesus is using, they understood every single piece of it. So by transporting ourselves into that time, not sitting here in our time saying, well, that doesn't make sense. Well, of course not. We don't have whitewashed tombs. But take that extra step of saying, what if I go and find out what they were living? Will that help me understand? Because we're not reading opinion. I'm not asking you to go find an opinion. I'm asking you to see how everything in this world points back to Jesus, including history, archaeology, geology, any kind of ology you want to think. And I want you to start looking for that. All right. Now, in Acts, there is another spot, and it's in your extra work for today. So please go to Facebook under Jot and Tittle and get your extra work. Paul uses this phrase after Jesus is gone and Paul's on his journeys and stuff. He coins this phrase, whitewashed, as well. And I want you to look at that because that will help put it into context. And when you see Paul's sermon, I want you to look in your margins, and it's going to take you to some Old Testament and go there. Take that extra step. It may not be able to do in one day. That's okay. Go that extra step of going there because it's going to teach you some historical things. Okay? And why Paul is also using that phrase, whitewashed. That's been a wonderful lesson. Hopefully that you will get excited and curious. The first time I tried it, I was sold. The first time I opened up another book to look up something historical, I was like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. So allow yourself to be carried away with the curiosity and the interest. Okay, now let's spend the next 2 minutes, of wrapping this up as to what this I am statement is. Okay, so you continue doing the history lesson, and we're going to close like we usually do. What does it mean to us as Christians for Jesus to say, I don't want you to be whitewashed. I don't want you to be a decorated tomb. With all that you've learned from looking up and discovering what was happening during this time, what possibly is Jesus telling us about who we are? I'm going to sum up my conclusion. We are not intended to be fake. Yes, people will look at us. We're imitators of God. Of course, we're going to have an audience. But we are not imitators of the law, of the land, of how man has interpreted the law, God's word. We aren't supposed to wear masks. We aren't supposed to hide our sin. You know, one of the problems that I had when I was a little girl is one of the people that abused me was in the church. And you don't talk about that. So there was no way it could be fixed. Because the church doesn't like to talk about sin. And so we need to understand that Jesus is saying, when I call you to follow me, I'm not calling you to hide all of your sin. And that's how you influence people. No, he's saying take off the masks. Don't hide the dead bones. I could bring those dead bones to life. We just learned that. Don't keep your dead bones in secret. Let me have your dead bones. And by Jesus working in our lives, that's when people see God. Not when we hide Jesus working in our lives. I am telling you, Paul didn't have anything up on me when he said I am the chief of sinners. No, Paul. No way, Paul. I have so passed you, and I am the world's in the highest sinner. And it's frightening for you all to know the sin that I go through. But he tells us in the Word, we can't hide our identity by hiding our sin. No. So today I want you to really think about taking off the masks, really trying to lead this life of non-hypocrisy. And when you look up the word hypocrisy, it is so much deeper than just oh, you're all hypocrites. No. Hypocrisy has a level that we all are tempted to go under, to hide behind. Me too. I'm terrified to expose all my life to you. I'm terrified. I could come on these videos and I'm not a great speaker, and you can tell I'm not very professional. I'm just kind of a regular girl. But I need you to understand. I don't want to be a blogger. I don't want to be a YouTuber. I don't know what it's called. I want to be a Christian with you. I want to fall in love with the Word with you. So I'm terrified. I'm terrified for you to see the dead bones. But you can't see Jesus in my life if you don't know the beauty of the dead bones he has brought to life. Don't hide. If you are a Christ follower, he wants you full blown. Full blown, guys. As you study today, I'm going to tell you this is scary. But see if you're willing to take a couple steps forward. I love you guys so much.